Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP Vlog and Podcast. So every Sunday at 8 a.m. London time, we like to do this vlog and podcast, which is really just a summary of the news from Zimmer Peacock for this week. So I'll jump into it. So some of the things that we've talked about this week from ZP are regarding aseptic clean room manufacturing. So obviously at Zimmer Peacock, we're ISO 13485. We make a lot of wearable biosensors, and I'll talk about wearable biosensors again in a bit. But some of these sensors I would describe as, transdermal. Another term for this is sort of subcutaneous, but either term, we go through the skin or we're under the skin, at which point then, you become essentially a medical device, and you can be a source of infection. So it's important to be able to claim and do, not just claim, but do, this kind of fabrication, this kind of manufacturing in a clean environment. So at Zimmer Peacock, we do have those kind of environments, where we have obviously a class 7 clean room. There's a lot of personal protection equipment in place, and it's that personal protection equipment is actually to often protect the devices from us. As a human being, we're a host to, I don't know how many bacteria, but our skin is a host of bacteria. Our bodies, our guts are full of bacteria and viruses, and so we don't want to necessarily, well, we don't want to put those materials onto these wearable biosensors. And so at ZP, when we say that we do aseptic manufacturing, we obviously keep the place very clean, but we also monitor the sort of microbiology load in that laboratory. We do something called plating or colony forming units counting, where we'll sample the environment, test it on agar plates, and ensure that the environment is actually clean. So at ZP, we've just been talking this week about that essentially capability to do clean room fabrication. So we're happy to discuss that. Now, some other news from Zimmer Peacock this week is, in addition to talking about clean rooms, is we also, every Thursday at 8 a.m. London time, we do have our ZP Developers Zone webinar. In the ZP Developers Zone webinar, we talk about, questions that kind of came in from the week. And this week we talked about lactate monitoring athletes. We talked about measuring chilies, and we talked about glucose to API, or glucose to application program interface. Now, the lactate monitoring in athletes was because obviously one of the kind of indicators of an athlete's maybe fitness is their lactate levels and their recovery after exercise, which you can probably do through lactate monitoring. Now, the chili question we had this week was very interesting because the inquirer was actually looking for what's called HPLC, high pressure liquid chromatography. They wanted to measure the HPLC, or by HPLC, they wanted to measure the hotness, which therefore meant that they wanted to measure the capsaicin. And so we said, look, we don't do HPLC, but we do something called food sense. So that was part of that. And then the last one was glucose to API. So at Zimmer Peacock, we've been building to this for a long time, which is, we're very aware of all the developers in this world who have great ideas, and they want to develop sensors for various applications, including glucose. And so we have a whole platform now. You could refer to this as an SDK, a software development kit, so that people can develop their own sensors for their own or develop their own applications. So we also talked about that. Now, expanding on that glucose to API, we've actually produced a kit now to reflect that glucose to API. So somebody is looking for an SDK, a software developers kit for measuring glucose. We have everything in a kit form, and people can just go in there and essentially purchase it. And it's a similar thing now also for cannabinoids. Now it's legal in, at least in Europe and in the US. Well, actually legal in Europe and I think in Canada to grow hemp. Hemp is a natural product. It has, I think, good fibrous materials. Now it's more notorious, let's say, for also producing sort of marijuana, which has an active molecule in it called THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. So this week we know that there's, people want to measure um, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. They also want to measure CBD, which is cannabinol or cannabinoid diol. They want to measure THC and CBD, and so we have also talked about a developer's kit or an SDK, software developer's kit for people interested in measuring cannabinoids, and we have put a website out about that. I think with time we'll go through all of our biosensor work and probably cover all of our sensors with a sort of sensor to API kit. Now, something that came out of our webinar this week was actually form factors for wearable biosensors. So, I'll just sort of say it very quickly here that, when somebody says, I want to have a wearable biosensor, first question is well, one of the first questions is, do you want it invasive, minimally invasive, or non-invasive? Now, everyone wants non-invasive, but we did do quite a webinar on on this, and we sort of discussed that you have risks associated with these strategies. Non-invasive would be very acceptable by the end user, but possibly would, if you were trying to do a non-invasive glucose sensor, be at least acceptable by the clinician, for example. So we have gone through this in quite some detail, and we did, as I said, there's a video up about that, about the wearable form factors, talking about non-invasive, minimally invasive, and invasive. And then just finally this week, at ZP, we do have this kind of, health. We started in health, and we're also very active in sports. We're also very active these days in agriculture, and now, not now, but our sensors also, because of this environmental application that we have also just put a note up this week about the fact that these sensors can be used in aquarium type applications. Now, when I think about aquarium applications, there's obviously at-home fish tanks, but there's also large, public aquariums, which are, often extremely professional, and so, I think we have those in mind rather than the home ones. So, if anyone's interested in developing a sensing system for measuring things like phosphate in aquarium situations, then ZP would probably be a good fit for those type of people. So if I was to summarize this week, we've obviously we've been discussing clean room fabrication, and that's particularly useful for implantable sensors. We did our developer zone webinar where we talked that time about wearable sensors, in particular around lactate. We also talked about the HPLC measuring of capsaicin in chili, and we also started to expand on our glucose to API. And then from our glucose to API, we're now talking about cannabinoids to API, because we see that there's sort of law enforcement applications and also agricultural applications for measuring THC and CBD when growing these kind of crops. And then finally, this is kind of an expansion of our sensors into the environment. It's actually sensors for aquariums. So, for example, in an aquarium, they have to sometimes measure the phosphate levels because they want the right amount of seaweed, let's say, in the system. So we go to these aquariums and we think they're all sort of self-contained, but actually, no, they're monitoring these systems. And so our technology allows for that kind of continuous monitoring. So I'll finish there and say, look, if you have any questions from Zimmer Peacock, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Don't forget, I think we're very good at this every Thursday, 8 a.m. London time. We always do a webinar and we answer technical questions there. So if you have any technical questions, please reach out to us.